All right, we're live. ZKGM, everyone. This is something new that we're experimenting around with Union. Is bring on some cool founders to basically just vibe for 45 minutes. I'm kind of keen to hear some stories and dive into some of the cool stuff that they're building. So we have Banksy and Kenny here from XION and Manta. Two founders I admire from two different perspectives. Kenny I've known for a while because we used to build together in the Polkadot scene, and of course XION is a good partner for Union, and like literally the only testnet on our testnet that can handle the capacity that actually keeps it. Like basically all of our users are actually interacting with XION technically under the hood constantly. So great job on that. Maybe you guys give a brief intro on your project, and then we'll kick it off.
Kenny, you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. So, hey everyone, glad to be here. Really personally very curious and want to dive into where you got your name from, Burnt Banksy. Maybe we can chat on that. But yeah, I'm Kenny. I'm co-founder over here at Manta Network. We're the largest modular L2 in the space. And, as mentioned earlier, we were previously in Polkadot. Happy to chat about that. Happy to chat about L2s. Happy to chat about apps. And happy to chat about Burnt Banksy's name.
Hell yeah. My name is Burnt Banksy. I got that name because about 4 years ago, I bought a Banksy art piece. I lit it on fire and broke the record for NFT sales. And now making crypto disappear with XION.
Interesting.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, for everyone listening, I'm Karel, founder of Union. Union, we do bridging. And so because of that, we get to partner with a whole bunch of protocols and so learn about their stacks. And we do it in a particular way. We generate zero-knowledge proofs for individual chains. So we usually dive into the internals of the chains themselves. So we see projects, dirty laundry, and if they're actually building what they've promised in their white paper, or if the code is something else. And so that's always a lot of fun. So be glad, like the people I invite on this podcast always build solid stuff. Maybe with XION Banksy, you can give us a brief intro on the kind of walletless world that you guys are building. Because I've seen it in market and stuff, but that's actually something I didn't dive in too much. So I would love to hear how does it actually work.
Honestly, it really is extremely simple. It is just smart contract accounts on a protocol level. So everything 4337 instead of being on a smart contract level, it's just it's an instance of that. Try to keep, and then everything on top of that is honestly just what you can do with that. Like we talk about signature abstraction and things like that, but effectively it's not net new. It's just kind of a functionality of what we can do when everything's in SCA.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, we had to do something similar for Union's governance. So we might have a look at how you guys implemented it, because we want to allow users to vote from any chain directly, which in the end turns out that like on various chains you're deploying like adapter contracts so that you generate like a unique account for that address and kind of get like distributed smart accounts everywhere. So.
Yeah, it used to be, I mean, a lot of most of what we've done, and I think just kind of the architecture really does come from like really early IBC stuff, right? And it's funny, I think we were using like auth-z is effectively like how we do a lot of the permissioning, which before auth-z was typically used for like effectively if you wanted to compound stake. That was it, and it was just like, hey, why don't we use this for permissioning? So some of the stuff is really exciting, and like especially the concept of like interchain accounts. Obviously, like we kind of go into that, but yeah, very very similar.
Yeah, the only thing like I would think when you build something like this is, do you notice that there's a struggle potentially like integrating wallets, custodial services, and providers, or did that go smoothly here too? Or you guys like an uphill battle, like the content layer?
Custodial services are different because it's a native token. Like that's always going to be annoying. We can integrate a wallet a lot easier because they're not, we really don't want EOAs. We want everything to be an SCA, but you can use any signature you want, right? So whether it be a JWT, ZK email, Ethereum wallet, Solana wallet, doesn't really matter. You use them as an authenticator rather than anything else. So that's actually pretty easy.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, maybe we need to look into supporting that for our channel. So I'll just steal some of this.
I mean, dude, I know we have something cool. We had something cool that we built like, I want to say 6 months ago that we're waiting on mainnet for. Do you remember what I'm talking about? The can't lose or the up only casino?
Yeah.
We could talk about that, but like that was one of the use cases of that. Okay, so it was, I don't know, but we haven't really launched this yet. We've been trying to launch it for quite some time. I guess we'll spill some alpha here. But we want to create a DEX where you can never lose. Everyone only wins. And like, you're asking yourself, hey, did you just disable the sell button and sell functionality? It's like, yes, that's exactly what we did. But we're pretty confident that everyone is going to see just green up to the right, and it's up only. Worked with Union.
So what does that mean? It's like if I go to your DEX, I can only buy, but then I can take those assets to any other DEX to sell, or?
Well, it was going to be, we wanted to do this as like a more so experiment of like pretty much just chain agnosticity, which is probably not the word actually. But wanted to do, I think it was Berachain we were looking at, right?
Okay. Yeah, that was the idea, to put this on Berachain.
Put it on Berachain through Xion, so you'd be able to, like, effectively didn't matter what chain you were on, but then have like Union, Berachain, Xion kind of together in this aspect of you can't lose. Because it's funny.
I don't know if you saw this like new paper by Paradigm. I think they announced this 3 days ago. It was like
the split one,
multiverse finance or something. Yeah, where indeed like either an entire market sector just dumps, or everyone keeps winning in this entire split universe, right? Like basically the idea was you could have a stable coin whose peg depends on some assets like staying stable or going up. Which you can like freely trade and collateralize again, as long as it's like pegged against assets that have like the same underlying assumption, like ETH goes up or at least ETH stays stable. And so if ETH does go to absolute zero, then sure, the stable goes to zero, but your loan itself is worthless again. Like you don't need to pay it back because you loaned on the same underlying assumption. So basically everyone loses, but at least there's like no bad debt in the system anymore.
It's interesting.
Almost like real finance, right? It's like we keep dancing and everything keeps going up until it like all collapses in together.
Yeah, I like it.
Let's switch gears a bit. So Kenny, before the podcast started, we were vibing a little bit about like Polkadot days and you guys starting out there and then building an L2. Can you like quickly summarize this journey? I'm like also really keen to hear if you have an idea on where this journey will end. Like what's the end state that Manta's going to reach?
Yeah, that's a really philosophical question. So yeah, we started off building on the Polkadot ecosystem, and Manta actually started off as an on-chain privacy project, right? So we built out, I'd say at the time, probably top 3 in terms of ZK teams, and we probably still today have the fastest L1 for on-chain ZK proving. But the problem was that, we had an amazing technology, but no users, right? And so what does that even mean? It just means you're a scientist.
All of crypto?
Yeah. And we're trying to break through that mold, right? And so at the time, we were just like, okay, where can we go actually find users, and what do users actually want? Because I think that ultimately is what the responsibility of any project is in this space right now, right? Because the more you attract users, that basically defines your success. And so then we pivoted over to Ethereum in the L2 space. But if you look at like L2s now, right, it's becoming a commodity too, right? There's like a bajillion L2s and there's no users, and there's just not enough good applications in this space. And so, where do I think the industry is headed? I think ultimately, right, it seems like right now, the meta is towards revenue capture as well as user acquisition, which, it's different than the previous generation meta, which was about user acquisition, but it was more like bot farming as a temporary stopgap for that, like user base. But I think now it's starting to focus a lot on real users. And so like on the Manta side, that's a lot of what we're exploring too, right? Trying to figure out like, how do we reposition Manta, not just as an L2, but, thinking about what types of apps that we actually want to build, deploy, scale, and start making money on.
Do you think in this like journey to acquire more users, generate revenue, the choice between like L1, L2 mattered at all? Or would you say like looking back over the years right now, like doesn't really matter? Because I personally see like a lot of teams now pick L1s again, and L2 stacks being like insanely complex, to be honest, right? With like 10 infrastructure providers in between, etc. So I always wonder, like, does it need to be that complex to make a user happy, or do you get real value from it as a company?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it matters to some extent. but it's not the end game. So I think you see a lot of sort of applications who, some successfully, some not as successfully, migrate from a general purpose L2 or L1 into their own chain, right? Like I think the first good example of this, I forgot, DYDX, right? When they eventually went off to do their own chain. And even on the gaming side with like Axie Infinity, they decided, okay, we got to build our own chain for this game. And like Axie Infinity and DYDX are really good examples of applications who started off on a general purpose chain and then had too much capacity and decided to move off on their own and brought the community with them. I think, no offense to Uniswap, they're an amazing product, but Unichain probably wasn't as successful in terms of like trying to migrate the users. But, this kind of goes back to the core question of like, does it matter to use these L1s, L2s? I think so, yes. But why it matters is not necessarily for technical reasons, for scalability reasons, because ultimately what we've seen is that if you have enough capacity, you're going to want your own chain. But the answer is more so for bootstrapping your community, right? So like when people are looking at launching on Solana, when they're looking at launching on Base or, Monad or something, they're not saying, oh, this is the best technology, right? Which, it must be some factor in there. It can't break. But at the same time, what's more important, technology or being able to bootstrap yourself into that ecosystem and acquire your first 100,000 users? And I think that's a lot of what applications think about in the early stage. And that's where it really matters for which sort of ecosystem you launch with.
Makes sense. Banksy, I saw you smile at the start of this. Do you have like a different opinion with your L1 or you muted?
Oh, can't hear you.
Don't have a different opinion. I'm looking at my community chat and there's like 40 memes of me already right now. So
what are the
memes started? Yeah, it's just very close up screenshots. Me.
Yeah. They got your pimples.
I think I tend to agree with you, Penny. I feel like there's like so much elitism in the around the Ethereum community on like the exact definitions, so many like peripheral infrastructure providers that allow people to spin up new L2s, that you almost create your own. You try to create your own market sector. Tell developers like you need to do this for technical reasons. It feels to me very similar to AWS telling everyone like you must do cloud if you want to scale, right? Like a successful app must be on the cloud. And I think right now, actually, with like hardware getting so much better over like the last 6 years, I would say, that everyone has, or at least I see lots of startups move back to say like, oh, well, you just get a big machine at Hetzner, right? You just get something with, because
Hetzner and co-location, definitely,
just get a machine with 128 CPUs.
People ever returning to bare metal servers in their own basements and stuff.
No, not that. Indeed, like you still have like a data center, but instead of like a Kubernetes cloud with like your database is all distributed, etc., just get like one big server yourself, put everything on there, and see how far it scales. And that usually scales all the way until you get like acquired by a big player or you have millions of users. So to me, at least, like the whole L2 game in crypto almost like seems very similar from a technological perspective to that, where in the end, like we have now a couple of high performance chains that actually do allow your app to scale for a very long time until you need to break out.
I will say that has always been pretty funny to me of just the worry and need for hyper performance when block spaces are just simply not being used. I think as long as we keep hyper optimizing for new users, I think we're going to keep going down the right path in this industry.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, I will say this, like at least like with testnet we encounter this quite often. Like even if block space isn't filled up, we do notice like massive difference between various chains and their like capacity to take transfers, how fast they can confirm it. So far, like for all of our stuff, anything that touches Ethereum, but also Sequoia Holesky is like an absolute nightmare. And even if we see like empty blocks, still getting like user bridge transfers reliably in there at scale is like extremely difficult to do so. So I also get why developers might say like, fuck this shit, we'll just try it ourselves with our dedicated instance.
Fair enough.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. It's a good, like it's a really interesting question, I think, at the end of the day, is like what belongs on blockchain and what doesn't. Because, you know, like one example I like to give here is that everyone's talking about, you know, getting AI on chain. And when people make this argument, they talk about, you know, two options. Either it's going to be on chain or you're going to have to pay for it with like ChatGPT or something. And you can't guarantee models. You can't guarantee certain things. I'm not really sure, you know, why that's such a problem, because, you know, people are using it all the time already and it seems fine. But, you know, people tend to ignore a third option, which is running local LLMs on your computer, which is becoming so freaking viable. Like I have probably like, I'd say 5 or 6 different models on my laptop, and I just whip them out when I'm on the plane. And it's like having a team with me on the plane. And so like, you think like even with normal applications on the blockchain, you know, one of the things that I like for teams to explore is, you know, what do you really need to put on chain versus what can you use as like a purely centralized application. One application itself can have components that are on chain and can have components that are off chain too, because, you know, like we think because we operate in this space and we are, you know, kind of in our own little bubble, that these applications like Pump Fun and, you know, all these others that hit like 100,000 DAUs is amazing. But that's really just a drop in the bucket for real applications, right? Like when you look at Duolingo, they've got like 20 million daily active users. And, you know, we're trying to, you know, celebrate our 100,000 daily active users. But like, you know, can you really put 20 million daily active users on any chain? Can you put it on Solana and, you know, see Solana still stay up? I'd say probably not. So, you know, it still goes to the question of like, you know, if you really want to make it scalable and you really get to 20,000 or 20 million daily active users, what's on chain and what's not?
Yeah. And I think that like, I mean, I think also like you look at, you know, Duolingo has a total addressable market of daily active users, of people who have an internet connection in the app, right? But I think that crypto in and of itself has a total addressable market of people who have wallets and things like that. And so it's, you know, I think to say that like 100K, I do think, given the fact of, I don't know how many MetaMask downloads there are, but, you know, as a percentage of MetaMask downloads, I think it's pretty high. And I think that could be celebrated. Obviously, in perspective, it's very low. And that's one of those things that we need to break. I think it's also a really good point of like, what do we need to put on chain? I remember back in 2020, I was building what I thought was going to be the first decentralized NFT marketplace on Solana. And I'm like, everything needs to be on chain. I totally took that other end of the pendulum, and I'm like, every single thing needs to be on chain. And then, you know, obviously, whatever, a couple things happened. Solana, it just kind of it was simply not feasible. It took like 14 transactions to get a single NFT auction going. It was, and like if any one of those failed, which frequently happened, it would be lost in race condition. Like it was fucking awful. You know, but suffice to say, it then kind of coming on that pendulum, and then you look at like Magic Eden, which came into the Solana space and was just like, hey, almost none of this really needs to be on chain. And you had the speed, you had the notion of security, but then you kind of also realize that like, as we do, and like this is going to get pretty contrarian, but like people don't actually give a shit. Like trying to find value for some of these things is what we struggle to do in this industry. And I think that like doing things for the sake of doing things is like great for the circle jerk that kind of is this community, but unfortunately comes in and allows for like a very centralized party to kind of eat everyone lunch. I mean, look at Base. I guess it's probably one of the best examples.
Yeah. It's funny you said the word circle jerk. I had to stop myself from saying that.
No, fuck that, dude. You don't have to stop yourself from doing shit.
Yeah, permissionless.
Yeah, for me, it's always been like the only thing that made sense was finance, and I've struggled to find like other use cases where it truly made a lot of sense to put it on chain. I do think if you're like the one advantage of like just smart contract and front end is, as a startup, you have zero other costs, right? Like you just deploy a contract somewhere, there's like no infrastructure costs, no persistent stuff that you need to do. So from like being a developer myself, like this dream of I just deploy a contract on Solana and then host a decentralized front end somewhere, and I literally don't have a server dashboard I ever need to log in myself, no metrics, infrastructure I need to monitor. I think that is like a super convenient dream. And that's actually initially why I want to like build on Ethereum. Like I had this like read the yellow paper, thought, oh yeah, a global synchronous virtual machine, you deploy on it, your stuff runs, you're good to go. Don't need to host your own servers. That is actually really powerful, but I don't think anyone can ever figure out something that's scalable enough to actually indeed like have 20 million daily active users on it and still stay performant, especially competing with other apps.
Yeah.
It's funny because like I remember when the Ethereum white paper first came out and everyone was talking about like decentralized Uber. That was like the
that was a big one. And
right?
supply chain. Everyone loved supply chain management.
And like look at where we are today. There is no decentralized Uber. It's just decentralized finance, which is great. But yeah, I mean, to your point, Karel, like I also agree that right now the only solid use case is finance, and even like SocialFi, GameFi, like the incentives that they use in order to attract users are all financial incentives. So it's just, you know, another sort of wrapper of DeFi that's painted in, you know, a different color. But ultimately, I think that speaks volumes to the potential of decentralized finance. So yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point. That's kind of a lot of what we focus on is trying to not do DeFi. It's very annoying, but the word like consumer chain, it's such bullshit because of that exact reason, right? You're either SocialFi, you're GameFi, and at the end of the day, it's just the finance kind of part of it with a different UI. I do think that there's like really, really exciting things. Like, I don't really give a shit about a decentralized Uber. Like, I think it could be cool, but there's a bunch of times where it's just like, hey, why the fuck are we doing this? I think there's going to be a lot of advancements, and like, I think tech as like a baseline won't be the catalyst for a lot of these, but I do think that like if you look at some of the stuff with zk-TLS, I think that's actually really exciting. And app attestations on chain, I think will be extremely, extremely exciting, because I think that like in combination to everything that people are working on, people as in XION, of course, with abstraction, you know, I think as you can start coming to people and giving them like real world value, like we're working with Uber right now, and we're effectively saying, hey, log in with your Lyft. Using zk-TLS, we can understand if you're a top rider and effectively get paid to swap over to Uber. Like this is kind of that first iteration of zk-TLS that we're seeing on our chain. We have one, I think, next week or the week after coming with Nike and Strava, which will be really exciting of like how much you've actually run. And so it's like, I think for a while, at least I've been kind of building in this industry since like 16, 15. Since Consensus was here in New York. But, you know, I think that we never really came to people and were like, hey, this is how we could actually make your life better. It was more like, hey, this is a better future of transparency, security, decent, like trust, blah, 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 and kind of expected people to come in, which obviously the three of us did. But I think in order to actually hit that like mainstream catalyst of speed, you kind of need to go to them. And I think that vampire attacking Web2 companies is going to be a lot of fucking fun. I was here during DeFi summer, and that was a lot of fucking fun.
I literally wanted to say, like, I love the idea of zk-TLS, but the only reason I see for it is you force them to come on chain, right?
Yeah.
Because previously, before this, like,
Correct.
Uber and Lyft could provide attestations themselves perfectly fine. They just were unwilling to. So with zk-TLS, you just force them to commit. Yeah.
And that's fun. Like, I love the idea of just like people ask, and effectively it's just like, yeah, hey, the moats that Web2 made for themselves are effectively going to be the thing that opens them up for attacks. And it sounds cool to say. I sound like a cypherpunk, and that makes me feel good.
I think your point, Banksy, about the whole, you know, decentralized Uber and why it's kind of useless. I totally agree. I think like one of the other things is like, I personally don't believe that we're going to get very far by trying to simply copy Web2 applications and just throw it on the blockchain and say, okay, we built the same thing, but with the blockchain.
But
right?
Worse.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like the user experience just can't compete. And you've already got these giants who have already owned the market share that can completely outcompete you on levels that you don't even know how. And so like when you see these types of instantiations of Web 2 to Web 3 clones in the crypto space, right? Like very seldom are they successful, but the applications that do become successful are very novel, never before seen use cases. And, you know, one example I like to give is I have a friend who built the world's first DEX. And this was called Ether Delta, and it was back in like 2017 ish, 2016, 2017. And Ether Delta was a complete clone of a centralized exchange, right? So it's order book, and you can think about like, back then there was just no liquidity, and it was on Ethereum. So not only was it slow, but by the time your transaction actually goes through, there's no one to match it. It's just a terrible user experience. And from there, I was extremely skeptical of decentralized exchanges. And then, so when Uniswap came out with the AMM model, I was also pretty skeptical, because I was thinking, oh, this is just going to try to clone a centralized solution on top of, blockchain again. But it was a completely different sort of approach to how trading is done. And it works. It worked. And obviously it's proven to work. So I think like, the innovations and the novelty that you can create with blockchain applications is where it's going to be. It's not going to be sort of, cloning over the Web 2 stuff.
Yeah. And I think that like you'll see, sorry, Karel, go. Sorry.
I only had a really dumb thing to say, which is I remember Ether Delta, and I think that actually was one of the main things why I left Ethereum and started building on Alt L1s, because my experience was just such garbage that I like almost rage quit it. I was like, this is just going nowhere at all. Let me see what else is out there.
Yeah, it's true. Like, I mean, it's. I think the main issue, quite honestly, that we see is just a lack of ideas, and like this is why we hate giving out grants. It's because it's like, hey, I don't need another fucking AMM. Like that's not interesting. But I think we started to go out and target more Web 2 with the kind of the promise, like while packaging everything as like genuine products of like, hey, now you can do this, and this is why as a Web 2 company you would like this, rather than just kind of throwing arms in the air and being like decentralization security. It's like there's a point where we kind of got to go to them, and I think that like it's mostly shown in a lack of genuinely really good ideas in this industry, because innovation isn't really rewarded, quite honestly, especially on the application level. And I think a lot of that comes from an inability to generate users. Like you look at any social, like DSO or friend tech, and yeah, you had really big spikes, but you were again capped out at the amount of MetaMask users that there kind of were. So you can't have network effects without a fucking, you can't have a social network without network effects here. And I think that like Y Combinator needed growth for an application to survive isn't able to be here because there's such a high friction rate and high, user drop-off rate, which is like ideally exactly what we're working on. But that's really led to a really bad environment where only the money, like, not to be like that dick on like Anna on Twitter who's just like, all the money goes to infrastructure, but it's true because it's also where all of the innovation lies. Like the last really cool application I've like seen, aside from what's built on Zion, because I'm obviously fucking biased, maybe Uniswap v3, like, and not much else there. Because why the fuck would you? Like, even look at Uniswap, they're going to infra. It just doesn't make sense to be an application in this industry.
And also, I think, a point you brought up about like friend tech and the spikes and stuff, it goes back to decentralized finance as the core use case, because I would argue that the reason why you saw those spikes wasn't because people realized how amazing of an application friend tech was, right? Like it's because they wanted to farm and tokens and incentives.
That's true. But I mean, I think you can also like, I do like the concept of vampire attacking too. Like that was how, however, like if Chef Nomi Maki, what was it? Hadn't fucked up. If Chef Nomi hadn't fucked up, like it was a really cool concept. Did it die in 5 days? Yeah. But like it was a really cool concept of, hey, tokens are an incentive. I'm not saying that your whole product, but it's kind of fucking cool sometimes if you think about it like that.
Yeah. I feel like one thing here as well is if you do like a truly like direct to consumer app in crypto, because everything is so heavily financialized, it kind of always becomes like a bit extractive indeed, where it's almost like sports betting, right? That's the type of app that you're building if you truly only focus on end consumers. I think a lot of builders are inclined to focus on infrastructure because they might feel that it is ethically better to do so, right? It's like you're targeting other businesses, other engineers who need this as a service know better what they're getting into. I haven't seen that many examples of good direct-to-consumer apps, which are not extractive for the end user, right? Which are not totally playing them. Like everyone loves Pump.Fun, right? It's the VC's favorite, but it's just mass extracting value from tiny users, right? And Binance Solana as well. So maybe indeed like not focusing on 20 million users, but instead just focusing on like 10 power users who know what they're getting into is actually the better play. If indeed finance is the
I think it's the only play. Like, quite honestly, I think, and I was working on a deck this weekend about this actually, where it was like the thing that we kind of unlock, we being XION, is the ability for you as an application to win off of economies of scale, rather than, to your point, having these kind of key whales. Not to shill.
But with Manta's user base, Kenny, like you guys started with like ZK privacy, right? So that must have been like a very particular user base, like a very small one, I guess, who cared about that. And then you went.
Yeah, we're extremely naive. I think that, you know, we thought if we built an amazing technology and slap a pretty good product on top of it, then people are going to come. But we didn't. We took for granted the hurdle of moving into the Polkadot ecosystem in the first place. And I think like that's probably the biggest struggle for the Polkadot ecosystem, because I frankly think that the technology is amazing. They've come a really long way. They've got great ideas that are building, but everyone uses MetaMask, everyone uses Phantom, everyone uses, you know, Kepler, but no one uses, you know, Polka.wallet. I don't even wallet.js or Polkadot.js, right? Like
Soulflare.
Is that? I don't know.
No, there's a bunch.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So like, you know, even bridging assets and, you know, creating that connection with the broader Web3 ecosystem is just so, it's just so hard. And so, you know, it is as long as Polkadot is unable to tap into that broader bridge, then I think they're always going to suffer from a user problem, which is ultimately what every project's going to face once they launch, right? Before that, it's like, does the tech work? Is the product great? And then after that, it's like, why aren't there users?
Yeah. And so when you guys did the L2, did you have like a specific other strategy to attract more users? Did you, besides being more accessible?
Yeah, I mean, when we launched our L2, it was a completely different world than it is today, right? Like when we launched it back 2 years ago, we were one of the only L2s in the market. And so it was such a crazy experience. We had, I think, 2 billion in TVL locked before our token even launched and stuff. And so it was insane. But now we're in a completely different market, right? Like L2s are commodities and it's very easy to launch them. So it's very hard to compete on value. So it's definitely time to start looking elsewhere. And that's what we've been doing over here at Manta.
Oh, can you give us some alpha? Like what's the...
Yeah, I mean, you know, thinking about real like applications that are revenue generating, right? Like I think ultimately that is what is going to matter, because the revenue generation correlates with user activity as well, and it correlates with product market fit. And so, you know, we are also looking at a lot of applications that are in the decentralized finance realm. Some new primitives, new protocols that have never been done before, which I think have some pretty decent potential, just like we've seen, you know, Aave do and Uniswap do in the past. So yeah, I mean, those are some of the sort of avenues that we're exploring.
Yeah, so basically like the L2 team building apps directly on their L2 as well. So
that mostly, and some extremely close partnerships. Because like, yeah, like I think back to Banksy's point earlier about like grants, right? Like we've all gone through that chapter of grant funding, right? Like Manta was in the dead center of it, giving out grants, and you know, people build some MVP and then end up jumping over to like another network and cloning it, or you know, basically leaving half-baked products on the table and saying good luck guys, right? And so like that's sort of, I think, where we fell short in the first generation of thinking about how we work with you know, different application partners. But I think like we've got a new model now that I think works really well and aligns a lot of these teams long term without like this thought of trying to escape into other ecosystems.
Makes sense. Yeah, on the Union side, we've looked into the same. We're like partial mainnet right now. So we have like the Babylon Bridge and Canonical to a couple of routes for Baby and a whole bunch of BTC assets. But even there right now, like you kind of realize bridging long term also commoditizes really quickly. So what are like applications that align with being a bridge provider? On our end, you immediately see like technically a bridge provider is an asset custodian. Right? There's no other way to look at it, because any bridge on the one side is like locking up funds in a vault, and on the other side, like minting a debt token. That's the fundamental model that you're doing. So immediately you start looking at, all right, is there any like a stable coin we could build, or perhaps like our own LSTs, because the game is very similar to what you're doing, the type of tech that you're building, the LPs that you're talking with, the types of partnerships you do with DeFi protocols. And both types of products kind of go to DeFi protocols and sell TVL, right, with offers. Like I can bring this much to your chain, this many users with these levels of funds. Do you have special offers for them? So we too have been looking into like how can we basically broaden that product set that we're giving.
I feel like stable coins are going to be extremely competitive as well, especially now with the new sort of US administration. It seems like everyone is going after stable coins, including like legacy TradFi giants, right? So now you're looking at Fidelity as well. BlackRock, I guess they did it a little earlier. So yeah, like stable coins, I think is going to be a highly competitive market. It's probably going to be the new sort of L2 market.
Yeah. Is there a way to vampire them, Banksy? Like already, like anticipate this?
I mean, dude, I've seen so many fucking stable coins die at this rate. Like, I mean, I know we were all there for Terra, and like Magic Internet Money and things like that. Like, you had a lot of like vampire attacking attempts. I would probably say, like the auto pay loans, be like, I don't know. I think that it's funny because like they're taking a step back. All of this shit should be a commodity in a way. Like we are building public good infrastructure. And it's like, I mean, probably the best example is Ethereum, I will say, of just like everyone's very mad that the price is going down. And it's just like, hey, this is a public good. Like this is what happens to commodities. They get commoditized. And and so it's interesting to think of like, yeah, I think you have some branding and the L2 game will be the stablecoin game, but quite honestly, I mean, I think stablecoin game will be, there's a lot of government lobbying from USDC, and then you have USDT, which has a lot of fucking money, and then it's probably going to be those two, like really fighting it out. And I think it'll come down to like, it'll be like a OpenAI kind of thing. It's like, hey, they might not have the best tech, but they're doing a really good job lobbying, and that's how, in my mind, I think a lot of that success will arise.
Yeah. I think like in general, right, like markets tend to expand and then consolidate. You see this in all sorts of different industries, especially emerging technology, right? Like you saw that with social media, early days of social media, tons of different platforms, competitors to MySpace, competitors to Facebook, competitors to, everything under the sun. And now it's kind of consolidated into 3 or 4 giants, right? Including X, including Meta, and then everything else kind of falling by the wayside. And we see that in crypto too, right? Like, I mean, after Bitcoin came out shortly, there were tons of forks and everyone was trying to outcompete Bitcoin on technology, but no one could outcompete Bitcoin on community. And so, everything consolidated. Bitcoin is like 99% of mind share compared to its forks, 99.99% of mind share. And then we saw it with Ethereum too, and all these Ethereum forks that were trying to outcompete Ethereum. And now Ethereum kind of dominates that. I think we're going to see it in the L2 space as well, right? There's like a bajillion L2s all trying to dominate the L2 space, but ultimately it's going to consolidate into 1 or 2 giants. And we'll see that in the stablecoin side as well, which I mean, I think we're already seeing, right? Like the writing to me is on the wall, which is USDC and USDT. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think there's maybe going to be at least a geopolitical play going on where different countries or kind of large-scale collaborations will try to at least make sure that it's not dollar denominated? We'll see like, lots of Chinese tables and such.
That would be probably the most competitive stablecoin that comes to market, because like, global dominance of USD itself was questionable, especially during the early chapter of these tariff wars. But it seems like now the narrative and the sentiment is shifting a little bit around US dollar dominance, especially after this temporary trade deal with China. But long term, right? Like, I mean, we've still got BRICS, and we've still got a lot of other nations vying for power, and trying to see the downfall of the US dollar, for better or for worse, right? Like, not to get political, just the fact of the matter. So I do think like stable coins denominated in other currencies could be a potential interesting competitor, because it becomes a hedge to the US dollar, which right now we see Bitcoin being a option too.
We also see, I mean, it might come also down to just like, because I know Circle did USD Euro, right? Whatever, stablecoin for the Euro. So I wonder if, you kind of have this base layer of a USD brand name being USDC, brand name being USDT, but then still having like USDC Euro, like, and then kind of as sub brands to be able to protect.
I don't know
it.
if Russia would accept that.
You don't think so? I wonder.
USD Ruble, bro.
USD Ruble. That could go hard. That's called diplomacy right there. Let me tell you something.
It would be the ultimate Trump move, right? Like every currency.
Every currency is called USD.
All right, guys. I think we're at the end of our allotted time, and the downfall of the US dollar, or the global branding of the US dollar on everything, I think is a good end for this session.
Oh boy!
Thank you so much for joining. Feel free to have any final words. Shill your project.
On my side,
follow Manta. Kenny is incredible. Absolutely doing fucking incredible. I love you guys. I've been since you guys were doing privacy. I think we did something like maybe a year and a half ago. But would love to keep cooking more. You guys are awesome. And yeah, definitely follow Manta and Union. Obviously, I'm excited for the work we're doing with you guys too.
Yeah. What's your Twitter, Banksy?
It is Burnt Banksy.
Literally just burnt Banksy, one word.
Oh yeah, we got that. We got that earlier. It was the only one to burn to Banksy at that time, so it worked well.
Very good marketing.
Thank you.
How much was the Banksy, or did you just?
We bought it for 90. We bought it for 90 grand, and we sold it for 400 grand at the time.
Wow.
It was cheaper than I thought. I thought a Banksy would be more money. So
it was funny. I split that between two friends, and that was all the money I had. Like one of those, like, hey, if this doesn't work out, I'm gonna have a hard time paying rent kind of situations.
Good one. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for dropping by, guys, and have a nice rest of your day. Community, thanks for dropping by. I think we have another one scheduled for next week, so make sure to drop by then as well. Cheers, everyone.
Peace.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.